Hello there, welcome to my channel. I am Bryan Lomax, for those who don't know. And yeah, I'm going to give you my top 10 Bruce Willis movies. Given that he's pretty much bowed out of acting now for understandable reasons, I just wanted to have a look back and celebrate his career, and I'm going to do that by giving you my personal top 10 Bruce Willis movies. There's nothing less than a 4-star movie on this list. For me personally, you may disagree, as I say, and that is okay to do so. But yeah, I want to start with my least favourite and work my way to the best, as is traditional. And we'll start with number 10, which is M. Night Shyamalan's Glass. This is the trilogy closer. So yeah, he obviously started this trilogy with Unbreakable, made a secret kind of sequel in Split, which kind of got everyone excited once they realised it was a secret sequel. And then he capped off the trilogy with Glass, which probably, I would agree, for with the majority of people is probably the weakest of the trilogy. I will just say Split will not be appearing in this list. I don't consider it a Bruce Willis film because he's in one scene at the end as a nod. It doesn't really count. But yeah, I would say this is the weakest of the trilogy, but I still really loved it, and I found that Willis always seems to give his best when he's working with M. Night Shyamalan. Say what you want about Shyamalan, his ups and downs over the years, although personally I am of the ilk that say he's had more ups than he's had downs. Yeah, one thing you can't say is that he gets a phoned-in performance from Willis. It's just good to see all these different characters that Shyamalan set up through these films finally all coming to a head, sharing the same space, and ending in a way that, quite frankly, was really unexpected. It's not a perfect film. There's a few logic holes in the story, but when you're dealing with fantasy fiction, that is often the case, to be perfectly honest. But for me, it's about the ride, and the ride is the characters. Seeing the journey that has progressed throughout the 3 movies, and seeing it come to an end, and each of these characters getting a payoff in some way. And number 9 for me is Die Hard with a Vengeance, the 3rd film in the Die Hard series. This film for me is almost perfect as far as an action film goes. It just bungles the ending. If you don't stick the landing, it can do some serious damage. It fizzles out rather than goes with a bang, which is a shame because the rest of the film is absolutely on point. It's up there with the first one. It does a very good job in teaming up John McClane, Bruce Willis, obviously, with Samuel L. Jackson's wisecracking loudmouth. And it's a story we've seen many times before. Opposites attract, this kind of thing. You get 2 people who shouldn't really go together, and across the course of the movie, they grow in respect for each other and become a team. And it's just, yeah, it's a tried and true method of doing an action film. It's all in the execution, and John McTiernan knows how to execute it, just not quite the landing. Number 8 is The Last Boy Scout. This is a film that is written by Shane Black and directed by Tony Scott, brother of Ridley. I really like this film. This is exactly what I just said with Die Hard with a Vengeance. You get 2 people who are complete opposites, shouldn't really be together, but have to be together in order to solve a case, and across the course of the film have a growing respect for each other. It's an action blueprint, isn't it? A buddy cop movie action blueprint. Again, it's all in the execution. Thankfully here we have Shane Black on writing duty. This is a dude who knows how to do dialogue. He knows how to do cop characters, wisecracking cop characters with a smart mouth. See, Bruce Willis has a very particular kind of way about him, doesn't he? And I think he often does comedy, which kind of goes unnoticed. I think he's actually quite good at comedy when it's called on him to do that kind of thing. And I think he's just also very good at being dry. When you take dialogue written by Shane Black and you put it into the mouth of Bruce Willis, then you create something that's actually quite golden, because Willis has that dryness about him that makes Black's dialogue come alive in a really great way. Number 7 is Rian Johnson's sci-fi action flick Looper, in which, Bruce Willis plays the older version of this central character that travels back in time to assassinate himself. It's a bendy, time-twisting fantasy tale that, it really does get your brain in a bit of a spin, a bit of a loop. But it's brilliantly written and directed by Rian Johnson. There's some pretty dark moments in it, but Bruce Willis, once again, in his wheelhouse, playing this kind of cop type figure. His character is someone who is supposed to go back in time and kill people, and for various reasons he's chosen not to now, and double crosses the organisation that he works for, knowing full well he'll get killed for it. But it's a good character for him to sink his teeth into. Like I say, he's good at serious, he's good at comedy, but he has to be with the right director. Number 6 is Sin City. It's directed by Robert Rodriguez, and he's just he's a badass private eye. He's very similar kind of characters. When you look at what makes my list, I guess I like to see Bruce Willis playing a very particular type of character. He's that grizzled kind of detective in this, but he plays an old man who's done some really kind of bad things in the name of justice. You know, he's not maybe not on the level in the way that a cop should be, but he finds redemption, I guess, in the protection of this girl played by Jessica Alba. He makes it his life's work essentially to protect her, to keep her safe. Really like the character, really like the film. It's a shame they didn't really jump on the back of it and get a sequel in gear right off the bat. They waited so long that I think people lost interest. I do actually quite like the sequel. I thought it was all right, nowhere near as bad as people make out. It's just that when this one came out, it was new, it was fresh. We hadn't seen a film done like this before. You know, these literal comic book panels put on film because everything's done on green screen, and it's just, I think Robert Rodriguez really does a great job of doing a direct translation of the comic book, Frank Miller's comic book, to the screen. Number 5 is 12 Monkeys. Again, speaking of Willis working with particular directors, Terry Gilliam gets one of, if not the best performance out of Willis for this film. This is a film that it loses a couple of points just because there's a certain sense of repetitiveness as we get towards the end. His character keeps on having this flashback, and I feel like we have this flashback too many times. But beyond that, it's a really great story, quite grounded science fiction story. Again, a time travel story in which Bruce Willis plays this man who could seem like someone who's just losing his mind. And that's the central question. Is he generally someone who's travelled back through time, or is he just a loony bin patient who's off his rocker? And we have this character that he meets up with, Madeleine Stowe, who kind of has to figure that out. We see a lot of stuff through her eyes, and we're kind of like, if I was in her shoes, would I believe this guy, or would I just think he's a crackpot? And the thing is, it's Bruce Willis's performance that helps you buy into that notion. Number 4 is Pulp Fiction. Obviously, Quentin Tarantino film. Any actor's going to come off pretty well in a Quentin Tarantino film. Hell, even Eli Roth comes off reasonably well in a Tarantino film. Bruce Willis in this, he's I guess the closest thing we have to a hero in this story of vagabonds and hitmen and gangsters and anti-heroes, really, mostly villains. Tarantino does a very good job of making you, the audience member, feel for a bunch of degenerate lowlifes, basically. But of the degenerate lowlifes that are on show in this film, Bruce Willis's character is probably the least degenerate lowlifey. So he plays his boxer who's supposed to throw a match, but at the last minute he just can't do it. He doesn't, and then as a result, a gangster loses a load of money and comes gunning for him, basically, and all kinds of weirdness ensues. If you've seen the film, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Willis is probably the most likeable character that's because of the warmth that Willis is able to bring to the role. As much as Quentin Tarantino is a great writer, a great director, and I would hazard, a guess that he's very largely responsible for getting this performance out of Willis, but the fact remains it came out of Willis. Willis gave this performance, and it's one that warms you to this guy. Despite his unsavoury characteristics, at the end of the day, he does kill a man in the ring. He's not the nicest of human beings, but Willis does quite a lot to make you warm to him, where, as I say, he becomes the most likeable figure in a whole stream of what should be unlikable characters. Number 3 for me is Unbreakable. This is the first chapter of Shyamalan's trilogy. It focuses on this character played by Bruce Willis, who slowly across the course of the film realizes that he is unbreakable. It's not strictly true. He does have a weakness, but he's gone through his whole life not realizing that he never gets ill. He's never really hurt himself all that much, and it's basically it's the origin story of a superhero. It's very grounded. It's very gritty. It came out at a time before superhero movies were everybody's favorite thing. It was very much ahead of its time, and I think Willis gives a very understated performance in it. He's this father. He's just playing a father. His central concern is looking after his son. He's trying to rebuild the relationship with his wife, which is on very rocky ground. And the film is about him finding his purpose, realizing that actually these weird instances in his life are directing him towards his purpose. And it's only once he finds that purpose that he's able to rebuild, reconnect with his wife, get that relationship back, or seemingly start to at any rate, because a man with purpose is a lot more driven. He's able to love himself more, I guess, and by extension those around him. Number 2, and I'm in no doubt that this is most people's number 1, it's Die Hard. The first Die Hard film, absolutely brilliant action classic. If you think of classics of the genre, it's just, you say action, you go to Die Hard. I think Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, that kind of thing. Yeah, Die Hard's always at the top of that list. If you're thinking, what's an iconic classic action film, you ask that question, most people, if they're going to name 5 movies, Die Hard is going to be in there for sure. It's a brilliant film. There's not a single minute of screen time in this that is wasted. It's very, very tightly edited, very tightly scripted. It knows its concept, and it just launches into it brilliantly. It finds excellent ways to put the central character, John McClane, into these death-defying situations, but it also makes the character believable. This isn't, this film came out at a time when most action heroes weren't really heroes, they were superheroes. They were Arnold Schwarzenegger. They looked like walking houses, who could tackle anything and come off with barely a scratch. That isn't the hero that is at the centre of Die Hard. What we get in John McClane is an everyday cop who bleeds. By the time we get to the end of this film, he's damaged. He's barely walking. He's bleeding out. But he's doing it all to save his wife and the people that work with his wife. It's a great character, an iconic character. And this was coming off the back of Moonlighting. Bruce Willis got his break in comedy. I say again, he's very good at comedy. And, you look at his roots, they're in comedy. His Moonlighting was the thing that brought him to prominence. So when he was cast in this action film, a lot of people didn't really think that he had the chops. And, as any great actor does, he proved people wrong. So, yeah, totally embodied this character and completely flipped the persona he'd created as this comedy guy, completely flipped it around. So, yeah, great stuff. But my own personal number 1 is The Sixth Sense. I love this film. It's one of my all-time favourite movies. It's a 5-star film for me, as was Die Hard, don't get me wrong. But for me, it's just the emotional journey. of all the characters in this film. It's just, and again, it's Bruce Willis being very understated, but not in a lazy way. You know, you see him in some films and he's kind of showing up for a paycheck. It's not that kind of coasting. This is someone who's very low key. Everything is very deliberate. You can see that, you know, Shyamalan has probably had quite a lot of input there as well as a director. You know, let's keep things down low. Let's very minimal movements. This is a character who isn't flailing around and being very like animated, which Bruce Willis can do. You know, you look at things like Death Becomes Her. He can be guilty of doing that, but here is very understated, very minimal in movement. You know, like you look at the scene where he's talking to the kid, whose name completely escapes my recollections right now. But you know, that sequence when the kid tells him that he sees dead people, it's quite a long sequence in which the two of them are talking to each other. Bruce Willis barely moves, and it's not in a, like I say, it's not in a wooden kind of, oh, I'm so wooden and I can't act kind of way. It's just, he's just, that's just a character. You know, this is a guy who's very insular, very protects himself, kind of doesn't let much out. He's wounded. You know, we only find out why once we get to the end of the film. You know, and we across the course of the film, he thinks that his wife is neglecting him. His wife doesn't want to touch him or anything like that. And obviously, we get to the end and we find out why. And it's just, I think, going back over the film when you watch it on a repeat viewing and you see why is this character the way he is, I think Willis does an excellent job of really getting into that character and making the right choices from a performance standpoint. Sixth Sense is my number one. But what about you? What are your top 10 Bruce Willis performances or films? You can go either way. If I was doing performances, this video would have been different. I was doing films. These are my top 10 Bruce Willis films, regardless of what his performance is like in them. This is my top 10. But what's yours? Let me know down in the comments. Please do click that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Also share this video if you are that way inclined, because it would help me a great deal to be seen by more people. Yeah, thank you for watching this video, and until next time, cracking.